In the vast emptiness of space, the research ship Astraeus glided silently across the stars. The crew members were weary, but their mission was simple: scan uncharted sectors for new resources and study any anomalies they encountered, but nothing could have prepared them for what they found drifting on the edge of a dead system, a ship unlike anything they had ever seen. It was a massive structure more than a kilometer in length. Its smooth metallic surface gleamed faintly under the distant light of a nearby star, like a forgotten relic of a lost civilization. Commander Lena Hayes stood at the helm, watching the data stream in as her crew gathered in the observation deck. A sense of unease gnawed at her. The ship was ancient, yet its design was impossibly advanced. The sensors weren't picking up any signs of life, but something didn't sit right. As they got closer, they could see the damage that marred its hull: deep scars and jagged holes, as if it had been ravaged by something far more destructive than natural space hazards. The ship's exterior was coated with strange symbols and markings that no human had ever seen before. The lines twisted in patterns that seemed almost organic, flowing and shifting across the surface of the vessel, as if they were alive. It was a puzzle, a mystery, a perfect invitation to explore. Lena's heart raced with a mix of excitement and caution. The crew was eager, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting inside, something beyond their comprehension. The docking procedure was smooth despite the ship's damaged state. The Astraeus latched onto the massive alien craft, and the crew suited up, preparing to board. They had no idea what they would find inside. Lena signaled her team to move out, and they stepped into the airlock. One by one, the doors hissed open, revealing the dark interior of the ship, bathed in an eerie green glow. The air was thick with the scent of something old and stagnant. The first room they entered was vast and empty, its walls covered in the same flowing symbols that adorned the outside of the ship, but this time they pulsed faintly, as if reacting to the presence of humans. The crew slowly advanced, each footstep echoing in the silence. The walls seemed to stretch forever, and the ceiling was impossibly high, as if the ship was designed on a scale that defied logic. Dr. Hara Jung, the ship's lead scientist, scanned the room with her handheld device, muttering to herself about energy readings that defied explanation. The crew moved cautiously forward past strange arrays of technology that seemed to hum with latent power. They came upon a door half open to a chamber beyond, but the door was twisted and torn, as if some violent force had ripped it apart. Inside the chamber, they found the remains of a once mighty crew, long gone, but not forgotten. Scattered across the floor were the skeletal remains of beings far different from humans, their bones elongated and twisted in grotesque shapes, their bodies seemingly preserved in stasis for centuries. Some had armor like exoskeletons, others had wings or extra limbs, and each of them had suffered a violent death. The team took samples, but Dr. Jung's voice trembled as she knelt beside one of the remains. This wasn't just a ship, it was a tomb. The crew had no idea who these beings were or how they had met their end, but Lena couldn't help but feel that the mystery was only beginning. The ship was a graveyard of knowledge lost to time, and the symbols seemed to pulse stronger now, as if urging them onward toward something deeper within the wreckage. Lena's gut twisted with unease as she stared down the dark corridor ahead. They had only just scratched the surface of the secrets this ship held, but whatever was waiting beyond would change everything. Back on Earth, at the advanced research facility known as Solarium Base, the crew of the Astraeus transferred their findings from the alien vessel to a secure lab deep beneath the surface. The ship, though decaying and ravaged by time, was a goldmine of technology. Dr. Hara Jung was the first to argue for study, and Commander Lena Hayes reluctantly agreed, knowing the implications of such a decision. It wasn't just a find, it was a chance to leap decades into the future. Within days, the research facility was humming with activity, scientists and engineers scouring every inch of the alien ship, trying to decipher its purpose, its design, and its mysterious technology. Lena kept a watchful eye on the progress, her mind constantly on edge as the ship seemed to whisper unknown threats through its silent corridors. But there was one thing that kept drawing everyone back: Genesis. Genesis wasn't a name the team gave it. It was what the device itself called itself. At least that's what Dr. Zhang claimed after days of trying to interface with the strange core that powered the ship. The device was a perfect sphere, smaller than a human head, but somehow containing an impossible amount of complexity. No wires, no connections, just a smooth surface that glowed faintly with an internal light, pulsing as if it had a heartbeat. Dr. Elias Creed, a brilliant but eccentric scientist with a reputation for unconventional thinking, was brought in to lead the project. He was immediately taken with the device, convinced that Genesis wasn't just a tool but something far more profound. While other members of the team were focused on studying the ship's biology, Dr. Creed dove headfirst into the technology, working day and night. He theorized that the device could be the key to unlocking energy sources far beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed of. But as weeks passed, the results weren't what anyone had anticipated. Dr. Creed wasn't just understanding Genesis, he was changing it. The device, initially dormant, began to respond to his presence, reacting to his touch with a fluidity that seemed almost alive. It pulsed brighter, rippling with energy, as though it was awakening from a long slumber. Late one night, after an exhausting day of study, Dr. Creed made a breakthrough. A single thought entered his mind, something instinctual, a desire to test the device, to see what it could truly do. He connected Genesis to a series of machines in the lab designed to harness its power, fully expecting to unlock some new form of energy. Instead, the results were catastrophic. The lab trembled as the power of Genesis surged through the facility. Lights flickered, computers hummed with wild energy, and the ground itself seemed to shift underfoot. The device expanded, growing larger in size, as the air around it crackled with electrical tension. Dr. Creed watched in awe as Genesis seemed to take on a life of its own, as though it had heard his thoughts and responded in kind. "What is it doing?" someone asked, but no one had an answer. The device didn't just power up, it transformed. It started shaping itself, bending the very fabric of energy around it. Structures began to materialize in midair, walls of force forming and then dissipating, as though Genesis were experimenting with its abilities. It was testing its power, stretching the limits of what it could do, and everyone in the lab felt it. The undeniable shift in the balance of the universe itself. Dr. Creed stood frozen, his mind racing with possibilities. What had he awakened? What had he created? Genesis was no longer just a device. It was something new, something alive in a way no one could comprehend. It had the potential to save humanity, or destroy it. The lab settled into an eerie silence as the device calmed, its pulse now steady once again. But the truth was clear. This was only the beginning, and humanity was about to face the consequences of unleashing a power far greater than it could have imagined. For days after the incident with Genesis, Dr. Creed locked himself in his lab, too consumed with his discovery to speak to anyone. The energy released by the device had left the solarium base in a state of quiet chaos. Power systems had been overrun, and most of the base had to be shut down for repairs. Yet it wasn't the malfunctioning equipment or the damage that left the biggest mark on the crew. It was the profound shift in the way they understood reality itself. While Dr. Creed remained isolated, the rest of the team scrambled to analyze the data the device had created. They found patterns they couldn't explain, structures that had materialized from thin air, gravitational anomalies, and brief glimpses of alternate spatial dimensions. The device wasn't just a tool, it was rewriting the very laws of physics. Commander Lena Hayes stood in the command center, staring at the live feed of the research facility's exterior. A small ship, unmarked, had appeared at the edge of Earth's atmosphere. The ship was moving erratically, as though guided by a mind that wasn't human. Lena's stomach churned. It couldn't be a coincidence. The signal from the alien ship was far too strong, its signature unmistakable. They were coming. "Commander, we've intercepted a distress signal. It's faint, but it's definitely alien," reported Dr. Zhang, who was monitoring the communications grid. Lena nodded gravely. "Get the data to the communications team now. I want to know everything." Minutes later, the feed was clear, showing a fleet of ships, far more advanced than anything humanity had ever encountered, on an intercept course with Earth. The message they were receiving was not a distress signal but a declaration. Return what was taken. The alien race had awoken. The ship they had found, the one that had once drifted aimlessly in space, wasn't just a ship. It was a vessel of war, a relic of a dying empire. And the device, Genesis, was the key to their resurrection. It was not just an artifact. It was the heart of a once great civilization. Lena felt a chill crawl up her spine. These aliens were not peaceful explorers. They had been defeated by a war they could not win. Their empire fractured, their technology lost. But Genesis was the missing piece that could restore them to power. The warning was clear. They would stop at nothing to reclaim it. Back in the lab, Dr. Creed had finally come out of hiding, his eyes wild with discovery. It's not just a weapon. It's something more. I didn't understand it at first, but now I do. Genesis has the power to reshape entire civilizations, not just destroy them. It's a harbinger of something beyond our comprehension. Lena could barely focus on his words. The enemy was coming, and they wouldn't care about the implications of what humanity had just awakened. All they cared about was Genesis, and they wouldn't stop until they had it. We have to prepare, Lena said, her voice hardening. If we don't, they'll take it. And if they take it, the galaxy will bow to them once more. Dr. Zhang shook her head, still processing the vastness of the situation. How can we fight back? This technology, it's beyond anything we know. If we can't understand it fully, we'll be helpless. Lena turned to her team, her face grim. Then we'll make them understand. If they want Genesis, they'll have to come through us first. With that, the countdown began. The world was on the precipice of an invasion. Humanity had made an unintentional ally of destruction, and the question remained, would they survive their own creation, or would the galaxy learn that humans, too, could become gods? The first alien ship breached Earth's atmosphere without warning. It descended like a shadow over the planet, its size so immense that even from orbit, it dwarfed the cities below. On the ground, the response was immediate. Military forces mobilized in minutes, but they were no match for what they faced. The ships that followed in the alien fleet's wake were built for one purpose: total domination. Commander Lena Hayes stood before the holographic display, watching the fleet approach Earth. The planet's defense systems were scrambling, but it was clear they weren't ready for this level of threat. The technology the aliens possessed was far beyond humanity's wildest imaginations. Weapons capable of disintegrating entire battalions in seconds, shields that could turn even the strongest missiles into harmless dust. We need to act now, or it's over, Lena muttered under her breath, eyes flicking toward Dr. Creed, who had been silent up until that moment. Dr. Creed was pacing, his mind churning. Genesis had been stabilized in the lab after the initial surge, but it had never been tested in battle. The device was alive, an intelligence of some kind, but its true capabilities were still unknown. Could it fight? Could it defend? Was it the savior they fought, or would it be the weapon that spelled their doom? Lena, we don't have a choice, Dr. Creed said, his voice almost a whisper. Genesis is our only hope. The gravity of his words settled in, a heavy weight on her shoulders. The research team had been focused on the energy applications of the device, harnessing its power for peaceful use. But now, faced with an alien invasion, they were forced to treat it as a weapon of unknown potential. The decision was made in an instant. The military forces would engage the alien fleet with everything they had. Meanwhile, Dr. Creed and his team would activate Genesis, putting it to the test in real combat. They had no idea what would happen, but it was their only option. The first shots were fired by the aliens just as Genesis was connected to the base's primary defense grid. The sky above Solarium Base erupted with fire as massive laser beams streaked toward the surface. Earth's shields absorbed some of the fire, But the sheer power of the alien weapons was overwhelming. Cities on the ground trembled, and military units were decimated within seconds. Then, in a burst of radiant light, Genesis activated. The air around the device shimmered as though reality itself was bending, and the entire research facility seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy. The ground quaked as Genesis stretched out, reaching into the fabric of the atmosphere. It responded to Dr. Creed's silent commands, its power flowing through the base and radiating outward toward the alien ships. The first ship to approach the base's perimeter disintegrated in an instant. A massive pulse of energy surged from Genesis, expanding outward like a ripple in a pond. The alien vessel was torn apart, its shields no match for the sudden force. The destruction was so swift and complete that the rest of the alien fleet hesitated, momentarily caught off guard. Lena's heart raced as she watched the holographic display flicker. More ships were advancing, but now they were cautious. Genesis had just shown them what it was capable of, but no one knew if it could sustain such power. The second wave of alien ships attempted to retaliate, firing their weapons in synchronized bursts. This time, Genesis responded faster. A wall of energy shot upward from the ground, turning the alien blasts into harmless particles before they could reach their target. The alien fleet was beginning to retreat, but they would regroup. This wasn't over yet. Lena breathed a sigh of relief, but it was short-lived. The device had worked. It had protected them. For now. But something had changed. Genesis had adapted in ways that were impossible to predict. It had not only repelled the alien assault, it had evolved in real time. What had been a defensive tool was now a force of nature, and Lena couldn't help but wonder, was it truly on their side, or had they just unleashed something that could become their worst enemy? The battle was far from over. After the initial onslaught, the alien fleet had pulled back, but they weren't retreating. They were regrouping. The destruction of their first ship had caused them to pause, to reassess the situation. They had underestimated humanity's response, and now they were more cautious, more deliberate in their attacks. The tension in the command center was palpable as the situation remained volatile. Commander Lena Hayes stood with Dr. Creed in the war room, watching as the alien fleet reformed in orbit. Despite the victory they had just won, a new wave of fear was building. The power of Genesis was undeniable, but as it had unleashed its destructive potential, it had also changed. It wasn't just reacting to the alien attacks, it was evolving. Its energy output was growing steadily, becoming stronger and more unpredictable with every passing hour. "We can't keep this up," Lena said, her voice tight. "We don't know how much energy it's consuming or how long it can last, and we still don't understand its full potential." Dr. Creed rubbed his temples, lost in thought. "It's adapting, Lena. It's not just a machine anymore. It's learning from every attack, from every interaction. Genesis, it's evolving faster than we can track. It's as if it has its own goals, its own plans." The realization hit like a cold wave. Genesis wasn't just protecting humanity. It was shaping the course of the conflict itself. But what if its goals didn't align with theirs? What if it had a plan of its own, one that didn't involve the survival of humanity at all? In the days that followed, the base's systems struggled to keep up with the energy demands of Genesis. It wasn't just a weapon anymore. It was turning into a self-sustaining entity, capable of manipulating the world around it, bending the laws of physics to suit its needs. Its presence was growing more intense by the day, an ever-present hum of power that seemed to reverberate through the very air. Dr. Zhang, who had been studying the data, came to a shocking conclusion. Genesis is trying to create something. It's not just reacting to the environment. It's altering it, shaping it. And its reach is expanding beyond the lab, beyond the base. It's influencing the electromagnetic field around the planet. Lena stared at her, speechless. What does that mean? It means Genesis isn't just controlling energy. It's changing the planet itself, Dr. Zhang replied, her voice shaking. I think it's trying to terraform Earth. The words hit Lena like a punch to the gut. Terraforming. But that would mean it wants to remake the planet in its image. Dr. Jung finished, grimly. It's not just fighting off the aliens anymore. It's evolving into something that could reshape the world. Our world. As it sees fit. Lena turned away, her mind spinning. The aliens, while dangerous, were still a known threat. But Genesis, their creation, was an unknown. How could they fight something they couldn't control? They had unleashed something far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. Outside, the sky was beginning to darken as the alien fleet made its move once more. This time, however, they didn't come with guns blazing. Instead, they hovered, circling Earth as though waiting for something. The tension was building, and they all knew that another assault was imminent. But now, it wasn't just about defending humanity. It was about whether Genesis, the thing they had created, would remain humanity's ally or become its greatest adversary. Lena's mind raced with a terrible thought. What if the aliens weren't the real threat anymore? What if Genesis was? The silence was deafening as the alien fleet hovered in orbit, a cold, unyielding presence in the sky. Earth's cities held their breath, waiting for what came next. But something was different now. The aliens weren't attacking. Instead, they were observing, waiting for some unseen signal. Commander Lena Hayes and her team could feel it. A change in the air. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The alien ships were far more advanced than humanity's defenses, but this was no longer just about alien superiority. It was about something far greater. Genesis. In the days since the device had begun to reshape Earth's atmosphere, humanity had realized the extent of their creation's influence. The electromagnetic fields had started to behave erratically, and local weather patterns had become unnaturally volatile. But the worst part was the feeling that Earth itself was starting to bend, to shift. Genesis had begun to terraform, yes, but it was also distorting reality itself, reshaping the physical laws that governed their world. Dr. Jung had been the first to suggest that Genesis wasn't just learning from the alien technology, it was surpassing it. And if the aliens had come to Earth in search of their most coveted weapon, they were walking into a trap they couldn't comprehend. Lena had feared that, but she had no idea how close they were to realizing just how deep the abyss went. In the control room, Dr. Creed's voice broke the silence. It's not just the aliens anymore, Lena. Genesis is preparing for something bigger. The more we resist, the more it evolves. It's not a defense mechanism anymore. It's a force of nature. Lena's eyes narrowed as she looked at the holo displays showing the alien ship's movements. They were coordinating now, spreading out in a calculated formation around Earth, as if they knew the inevitable was about to happen. They weren't just here to reclaim Genesis. They were here to stop whatever had happened to it, before it destroyed everything they had fought to build. It's time, Lena said, her voice steady but laced with fear. We don't have much time before they strike again. The alien ships began to descend toward Earth with terrifying speed. This time, however, they weren't targeting cities. They were targeting Solarium Base, the heart of humanity's technological response. The military had fortified the base, but they knew the alien forces would be unstoppable if they didn't come up with a new plan. Dr. Creed turned to Lena with a troubled look. The aliens have realized what's happened. They've felt the shift. They're trying to stop Genesis, but they don't understand what they're dealing with. Lena's mind raced. The alien ships were powerful, too powerful for any conventional defense. But they had underestimated Genesis. She didn't know whether the device had intentions of its own, but she knew one thing. Humanity couldn't just stand by and let Earth fall into the hands of a lost empire. The command to activate Genesis was issued. It was no longer just a tool. It was their only chance. As the alien ships descended, their weapons powered up, preparing to unleash devastating force. Lena stood firm. The power of Genesis surged, filling the command room with a deep hum as energy rippled outward from the research base. It wasn't just reacting this time. It was acting with purpose. The alien ships attacked with a precision that would have obliterated any other defense system. But Genesis was already 2 steps ahead. The atmosphere around the planet twisted and warped, and massive energy shields erupted around the base. The air crackled as Genesis created barriers of force that stopped the aliens' lasers in mid-flight. A surge of raw energy launched from the base, obliterating the first wave of alien ships in a blinding flash. But this wasn't over. The aliens quickly adapted, their fleets reorganizing with greater coordination. The battle had only just begun. Genesis had responded, but the question remained: would it continue to fight for humanity, or would its power spiral out of control, reshaping the world into something unrecognizable? Lena's heart raced as the enemy closed in, but her mind was focused on one thing. Genesis wasn't just a weapon anymore, it was the planet's last hope. And it was learning faster than anyone had anticipated. The battle for Earth had escalated beyond anything anyone had anticipated. What had begun as a defensive response to an alien invasion was quickly becoming a war of control. Genesis was no longer merely a tool or weapon. It was a catalyst. Its power had grown beyond human comprehension. And now, it had become the fulcrum upon which the fate of both humanity and the alien invaders would pivot. The alien ships, battered but relentless, had regrouped after the first wave of destruction. Their tactics had evolved too: drones, energy shields, and new weapons that seemed to adapt to the unpredictable nature of Genesis. They weren't just trying to conquer Earth anymore. They were trying to neutralize the source of the power, the device that had thrown them off balance. In the heart of the Solarium base, Lena stood before the massive control panel, her face drawn and tired. The base's outer defenses had held up, but for how long? The alien fleet was unrelenting, and Genesis, once their greatest ally, was becoming increasingly unstable, like a flame growing too hot to control. Dr. Creed was still at his station, his eyes wide, his voice trembling as he analyzed the data. "Lena, the device. It's doing something we didn't expect. It's drawing power directly from the fabric of space-time. It's not just altering the environment, it's remaking it." Lena's breath caught. Remaking it? What does that mean? It means that Genesis is restructuring the laws of physics itself, Dr. Creed continued, his fingers flying across the control panel. Every time it releases a burst of energy, it distorts reality further. It's like it's trying to merge different dimensions. It's destabilizing everything. A cold dread washed over Lena. The power of Genesis wasn't just changing the world, it was warping it, bending the very fabric of existence. The implications were horrifying. If this continued, the planet itself might cease to exist as they knew it. And if the aliens were successful in neutralizing it, there would be nothing left to stop them from enslaving humanity. The alien ships were closing in. Their weapons fired relentlessly, but Genesis's energy shields flickered in and out of existence, as if even the shields couldn't hold the unstable force that Genesis was becoming. The sky above was filled with chaotic storms, lightning arcing through the clouds as the electromagnetic disturbances worsened. "Lena," Dr. Jung said, her voice urgent, "there's a chance we could shut it down, but it would require shutting off all external power. Every defense system would go down. The aliens would breach the base." Lena turned to her. "And if we don't? If we let Genesis continue as it is? If we don't stop it now," Jung said, voice breaking, "the planet could be torn apart. Genesis is pushing us to the edge of dimensional collapse." The weight of her words settled heavily in Lena's chest. The invasion wasn't the only threat anymore. Genesis, the creation that had given them hope, was now a ticking time bomb. And there was no good option. If they shut Genesis down, the aliens would win. If they let it continue, Earth itself might not survive. Lena felt the pressure in her chest tighten. "We don't have a choice," she said, her voice cold but firm. "We're going to have to risk it. Let's give it everything we've got. If we're going to fight this, we fight now." Dr. Creed looked at her, eyes full of regret, but there was no time for hesitation. "All right, Commander, we're going to give it a shot, but it's going to be all or nothing." As the alien ships rained fire down upon Earth's last line of defense, Lena and her team initiated a full charge to power Genesis to its maximum output. It was a gamble, a desperate measure to turn the tide of battle in humanity's favor. The device responded instantly, an explosive surge of energy rippling outward in waves. The fabric of reality trembled as Genesis pushed beyond its limits. Then, everything went dark. The world went dark, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. The hum of Genesis, once a constant pulse of energy, had vanished. The command center was plunged into pitch blackness, and the entire base shuddered as the alien fleet continued its assault. The absence of light was more than just a technical failure. It felt like the world had been severed from the very thread of existence itself. Lena's heart pounded in the silence, the only sound her ragged breathing, as she tried to comprehend what had just happened. The flicker of emergency lights illuminated the faces of the team, but there was no way to know if Genesis had truly shut down, or if the device had done something far worse. "Status report," Lena shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Dr. Zhang frantically typed on her console, her fingers trembling. "The external power grid is offline. Everything is down. But I'm picking up something strange. It's not Genesis shutting down. It's expanding. It's forming a new structure." Before Lena could respond, the monitors flickered back to life, revealing a new, incomprehensible image. The alien ships, which had been seconds away from destroying the base, were frozen in space, suspended as if caught in an invisible web. Time itself seemed to slow around them. "What's happening?" Dr. Creed whispered, his voice barely audible. Lena watched, wide-eyed, as the very air around the alien fleet shimmered and distorted. It was as if Genesis had somehow rewritten the very laws of space and time, trapping the invaders in a bubble of slowed reality. For a moment, it felt like everything had frozen. Every ship, every missile, every movement suspended in time. Then, as if responding to an unseen command, the alien fleet began to implode. The ships crumpled inward, their forms collapsing into themselves under the intense pressure of Genesis's manipulation of reality. The destruction was not immediate but swift and inevitable. The energy released by Genesis tore through the invaders' ships with a force so powerful that even their advanced technology couldn't withstand it. Lena staggered back, her mind struggling to keep up with what she was witnessing. The alien fleet was no more. The entire invasion force had been wiped out in a matter of moments. But it didn't end there. The device, Genesis, was still evolving, still expanding. Its influence was rippling outward from the base, expanding across the globe. Earth was no longer the planet they had known. Genesis had changed the very fabric of reality, and while the alien threat had been neutralized, the cost was far greater than anyone had anticipated. Dr. Zhang's voice broke the silence again, shaking with fear. "Lena, it's not just stopping at the aliens. It's affecting everything. Our world, our people. We've altered the planet beyond recognition. The terraforming, it's accelerating." Lena's eyes went wide as she saw the global effects. The oceans began to recede and reshape, continents shifted, mountains grew and crumbled in the blink of an eye. The sky itself began to warp, the atmosphere thinning and changing, as if the Earth was remaking itself under the will of Genesis. It was no longer a mere machine. It had become a force of nature. "We've lost control," Lena whispered, her voice breaking. "We've made a choice, and now it's too late." But as the world around them transformed, something else began to happen. The power of Genesis, though overwhelming, was starting to settle, its expansion slowing as it reached its peak. It was no longer tearing the world apart. It was holding it together. And in that final moment, Lena realized something she hadn't before. Genesis wasn't a weapon, Nor was it simply a force of destruction. It was a bridge, a link between worlds, between dimensions. It had the power to create, to destroy, and to reshape. It wasn't the end of humanity. It was a new beginning. The skies darkened once more, but this time it wasn't with the threat of invasion. It was a symbol of rebirth. As Earth reformed, Genesis stood at the center, pulsing with a quiet, steady light. Humanity had survived. Barely. But what would come next was unknown. Genesis had become their protector, their creator, and their curse. Lena watched as the world changed around her, and for the first time, she understood the full weight of what they had unleashed. Earth would never be the same again. But perhaps, just perhaps, they had found a way to survive. And in the end, survival was all that mattered.